dark and stormy night, and as I'm recording this, it's Halloween. So I thought it would be appropriate to read a bit of a story. And we've been looking at origins of some of the creature types in the woods the past few weeks. I said last week that would be the last one for a while. Well, actually, a lie, because I'm going to do another one. This one is another creature type that's in the new book, which I'm hoping to open the pre-orders for very soon, so keep an eye out for that on our website and on Facebook. The pre-orders for Mythic Cycles should be opening in the next week or so, so that's very exciting. The creatures that I'm going to talk about today are the gnoles. Now, you might be more familiar with the gnoles. They're a D&D monster, and the likelihood is that the origin of the gnole as a monster comes from the gnole, G-N-O-L-E. Gary Gygax, who wrote Dungeons and Dragons, claims to have invented the gnoll from a combination of gnomes and trolls. G-N from gnome, R-O-L-L from no, O-L-L-S from trolls. There you go, I got there eventually. The likelihood is that the gnoll was the originator of the creature type, though. And the gnoles appear in a text by Lord Dunsany, a short story, and Lord Dunsany is attested to be, he was certainly an influence on Tolkien. He was certainly an influence on Lovecraft, quite an early fantasy science fiction writer. And the gnoles appear in this short story, How Nuth Would Have Practised His Art Upon the Gnoles. Really they're not mentioned very much in the book, in the text at all. I'm going to read from the text shortly. But the story of the gnoles was taken up afterwards by a lady called Margaret St. Clair, who in 1951 wrote another gnole story called The Man Who Sold Rope to the Gnoles, and that took Dunsany's creatures and expanded them, built on them, and we've taken those creatures and put them into Mythic Cycles for use in the woods. So I will read a bit from Lord Dunsany's story, and then I'll tell you about how we've taken them and adapted them. So, I'm reading this from The Wizards of Odd, which is a compilation of lots of short stories. It's got Terry Pratchett, Douglas Adams, Arthur C. Clarke, lots of different fantasy authors in here. And the section this is in is Wizards and Whatsits, Stories of Comic Absurdity. Okay, so this is the category that it's been put under, and it's quite appropriate because the main characters in this story are the Nuth of the title, and Nuth is a wizard of sorts, but he's also a burglar. He's an acquirer of treasures for contract. So you can hire Nuth if you have enough money to acquire you a particular artifact or treasure by his magical art, but also by his burglary art. And although this is a 4-page story, I'm not going to read all of it because I still think that would be too long. Things take longer to read out than you think. So I'll just give you a general overview. Nuth, by this point in the story, has been landed with an apprentice with the unlikely name of Tommy Tonker. Tommy's mother has sort of forced him upon Nuth as an apprentice by a combination of flattery and blackmail. But this has actually turned out to be quite a good thing for Nuth because as a partnership between him and Tommy, they've been able to just carry out quite a remarkable heist. And so Nuth is now fairly flushed with his reputation or lack of reputation, because people don't know that it's him who's been responsible. That's why he's so pleased. So he's now planning a quite audacious next move, which is here we go. We'll start reading from here. Not even rumour whispered the name of Nuth. Were I to say that this turned his head, There are those to whom the assertion would give pain, for his associates hold that his astute judgment was unaffected by circumstance. I will say, therefore, that it spurred his genius to plan what no burglar had ever planned before. It was nothing less than to burgle the house of the gnoles. And this that abstemious man unfolded to Tonker over a cup of tea. Had Tonker not been nearly insane with pride over their recent transaction, and had he not been blinded by a veneration for Nuff, he would have... but I cry over spilt milk. He expostulated respectfully, he said he would rather not go, he said it was not fair, he himself to argue, and in the end, one winter October morning, with menace in the air, found him and Nuff drawing near to the dreadful wood. Now Nuff, by weighing little emeralds against pieces of common rock, had ascertained the probable weight of those house ornaments that the gnoles are believed to possess in the lofty, narrow house wherein they have dwelt from old. They decided to steal 2 emeralds, and to carry them between them on a cloak. But if they should be too heavy, one must be dropped at once. Nuff warned young Tonker against greed, and explained that the emeralds were worth less than cheese until they were safely away from the dreadful wood. Everything had been planned, and they walked now in silence. No track led up to the sinister gloom of the trees, either of men or of cattle. Not even a poacher had been there snaring elves for over 100 years. You did not trespass twice in the dens of the gnoles. And apart from the things that were done there, the trees themselves were a warning, and did not wear the wholesome look of those that we plant ourselves. The nearest village was some miles away, with the backs of all its houses turned to the wood, and without one window at all facing in that direction. They did not speak of it there, and elsewhere it is unheard of. Into this wood stepped Nuff and Tommy Tonker. They had no firearms. Tonker had asked for a pistol, but Nuff replied that the sound of a shot would bring everything down on us, and no more was said about it. Into the wood they went all day, deeper and deeper. They saw the skeleton of some early Georgian poacher nailed to a door in an oak tree. Sometimes they saw a fairy scuttle away from them. Once Tonker stepped heavily on a hard, dry stick, after which they both lay still for 20 minutes. And the sunset flared full of omens through the tree trunks, and night fell, and they came by fitful starlight, as Nuff had foreseen, to that lean high house where the gnoles so secretly dwelt. All was so silent by that unvalued house that the faded courage of Tonker flickered up, but to Nuff's experienced sense it seemed too silent, and all the while there was that look in the sky that was worse than a spoken doom, so that Nuff, as is often the case when men are in doubt, had leisure to fear the worst. Nevertheless, he did not abandon the business, but sent the likely lad with the instruments of his trade by means of the ladder to the old green casement. And the moment that Tonker touched the withered boards, the silence that, though ominous, was earthly, became unearthly, like the touch of a ghoul. And Tonker heard his breath offending against that silence, and his heart was like mad drums in a night attack, and a string of one of his sandals went tap on a rung of a ladder, and the leaves of the forest were mute, and the breeze of the night was still. And Tonker prayed that a mouse or a mole might make any noise at all, but not a creature stirred, even Nuff was still. And then and there, while yet he was undiscovered, the likely lad made up his mind, as he should have done before, to leave those colossal emeralds where they were and have nothing to do with the lean high house of the gnoles, but to quit this sinister wood in the nick of time, and retire from the business at once and buy a place in the country. Then he descended softly and beckoned to Nuff. But the gnoles had watched him through knavish holes that they bore in the trunks of the trees, and the unearthly silence gave way, as it were with a grace, to the rapid screams of Tonker as they picked him up from behind. Screams that came faster and faster until they were incoherent, and when they took him, it is not good to ask, and what they did with him I will not say. Nuff looked on for a while from the corner of the house, with mild surprise on his face as he rubbed his chin, for the trick of the holes in the trees was new to him. Then he stole nimbly away through the dreadful wood. And did they catch Nuff, you ask me, gentle reader? Oh no, my child, for such a question is childish. Nobody ever catches Nuff. So there we are, the origin of the gnoles in that story by Lord Dunsany. So what we've done with the gnolls. In fact, actually, there are gnolls in the first edition of the Woods. If you have the Secrets of Shandytown book, you will see there are gnolls in there. And when I was writing that book, I decided that I wanted a little sort of ratty race with curved goat horns, and that was my idea of what a gnoll would look like. But since, I mean, lots of fantasy games now have gnolls in them, but they are actually technically copyright of D&D, of TSR, Wizards of the Coast, so shouldn't be used without their permission. So I decided that to be on the safe side and not have gnolls, and also they don't actually appear in folklore. They're based on, or the kind of racial type of them is based on a lot of European little mine-dwelling creatures that have various other names that we have used in the Woods, but the gnolls themselves don't appear anywhere there. So we decided to drop that, and then we have the Norlocks now, who are sort of rat men. So and the kobolds are also quite kind of ratty, weaselly, and the Yaltogs are quite weaselly. So I didn't want another furry, mousy, weaselly anthropomorphic creature to be the gnolls. So what we've done with the gnolls is we've made them a kind of terrain hazard that players can agree to have, or that a DM can throw in to spice things up for their players. And the gnolls are in trees or in a piece of area terrain if you're playing the battle game, and they abduct they abduct models, which is exactly what they do in that text. They reach out from the trees and they grab models that are nearby, but they only grab models that are unperceived. If you're being watched out for, you're safe, but the moment your back is turned and you're not paying attention, the gnolls will attempt to grab you and snatch you and take you away. So that's how the gnolls work in mythic cycles, and of course there's a couple of pages of background on them as well. And we've decided to go with the kind of Lovecraftian theme because Dunsany is attested to being one of the sources that Lovecraft took for his work. And of course trees in the woods are a gateway across dimensions, a gateway across realms. And so the way that we've envisaged this is that the gnolls are beings from other planes that are using these holes in the trees as windows to reach through and grab, abduct people from the mortal realm and drag them back into their own nasty domain for whatever nefarious purposes they need them for. So I hope you enjoyed that little trip into the realm of the gnolls, discovering how Nuff failed to practice his art amongst them. And next week I will have another chilling tale for you. So snuggle up tight by the fire and don't have nightmares. And I'll see you next week.